Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 2020 General Membership Meeting. 2020 so far has been an extremely difficult year for us and crazy, as I'm sure for you guys as well, watching from wherever you're watching. What we had planned to do for this year, we've had to change our plans dramatically. And we've all had to basically live life differently than we've ever lived it before. It's pretty obvious by the virtue of us holding this meeting virtually, with the exception of our staff in the room. It's just a different time for us, and it's a different dynamic. So just want to take the time to thank you for joining us via Facebook Live from wherever you are. We really appreciate your attendance here. As usual, please, we have staff that's here that's monitoring the comment area, so please comment your attendance. Please say hello, your name and your store number, just so that we know you're here, and we'll document that you have attended this meeting. So, thanks again. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to our Secretary Treasurer, Allie.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe said, it's been a very difficult year, and things are very interesting, and we're trying to adapt. Last year, just to kind of bring it back a little bit, we were talking about the 50,000 GM workers who were out on strike, the 20,000 AT&T workers that were out on strike, not to mention the brothers and sisters in New England that were also out on strike. This year, things are a little bit different, as I said, and we're talking about things like PPE and CDC and using terms that we typically heard in movies or in other medical areas. So for that reason, Local 1500 has adapted in trying to assist our members by providing as much protection as we can. And I'd like to report to you that thanks to the executive board and the approval of the board and also the executives of the union, we've been able to procure much needed PPE. Let's start with the vest, which appeared to be a very big hit from what we hear. The vests, which probably were needed prior to the pandemic, were purchased, and by no means were these inexpensive. These are expensive items, but as said before, they are needed. So we were able to get 1,500 of them. We've already given out about 500, and we will continue to do that throughout the stores. Moving on, I'd like to report that thanks to Governor Cuomo's office in New York State, we were able to get 5 tractor trailer loads of sanitizer. So our basement was filled, and emptied over and over again by your reps, and that very necessary sanitizer was given out in our stores. I would also like to add that 5 tractor trailer loads can add up to about $2 million, which is something that President Newell actually pointed out, and we're quite proud of that, and we're pretty happy with it. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it in the stores, but if you haven't, please get in touch with us. We'll be glad to provide it for you. In addition, we were able to get 10,000 reusable masks. I believe Joe has a sample of it, and you should have seen these in your stores. These masks were provided by New York State for free, and because out of a conversation with the executive staff, we decided to have them printed and have our logo put on it so that you guys can wear them proudly in your stores. In addition, we were also able to get over 100,000 disposable masks, which have been distributed throughout our jurisdiction. And last but not least, I would like to introduce the latest item, which will be out in your stores very soon in the quantity of 15,000, which is the Gator. Joe? Thank you. So that should be out in the stores.
You're like Havana.
That should be out in the stores momentarily. And I just want to move on to just talking to you guys about something that we take very seriously. You guys have been given the label essential, which we took the time to have a discussion about this. Essential meaning absolutely necessary, of the utmost importance. Reason why we think it's important to mention this is because you can't go from essential to unnecessary, or even to have the feeling of disposable. And we're feeling that as the pandemic has gone on, and all of your service and everything that you've done, that feeling should not go away. Once this pandemic is over, the fact of the matter is that without you, nothing happens. You can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't provide food for your family, and that's something that isn't going to change, pandemic or not. That's always going to be the case. I'd like to move on to some more current events and reporting to you on some of the things that we're going to do in keeping with the adapting. We typically have a conference for our shop stewards. This year, the conference will be virtual, and it will be held with a Zoom presentation. So for those of you that typically do attend the Shop Steward Seminar, it will be presented to you on Zoom. I think we're all pretty familiar with Zoom. Everyone's been either communicating at work or with their family members that way. We will try and keep it so that everyone has the same messaging, so that that way we will record it. All of the messages will be recorded for everyone to listen to and participate. They will be live in most of the presentation. Therefore, you will be able to have questions and answers to your questions, similar to what we're doing tonight. This was something that we always did. Facebook Live is not a new application that we have, but it has become more necessary for us to communicate this way. For those of you who haven't seen another program that the union has been doing for about 2 years now, we've been doing a school supply drive, which will be open until September 14th. If you have not applied for your school supplies, please do. Talk to your rep, or simply drop us a message on either Facebook. Try and make it a direct message. It's just easier to monitor that way. Sometimes people tend to make comments within a thread, and they get lost in translation. So we do not want that to happen. But please let us know if you have any questions. Again, you could always talk to your rep. Moving on, for those of you that know Fred Walter, he has been working in the pension department. So he has not moved out of servicing. He is actually assisting in a really important process. We had some turnover there, and he has helped to transition that department from training to now the 2 people that took over, one being Monique, and I do believe we introduced Monique at the last meeting. If we have not, I apologize for that. But you can certainly call the pension department to speak to our new employee. The other employee being long-term member Terry Gorman. Terry was with our union for a long time. Previously with Pathmark, Terry was involved in a lot of different events and very knowledgeable in the union. We're really proud to have her on staff, especially with her knowledge as a union member. So they will be moving on, and just wanted to give a special thanks to Fred on a job very well done. And really the last thing that I have for you guys is one that we believe to be one of the most important responsibilities that any of us have, and that being the right to vote. We don't get to do this every year. It only happens every 4 years. It's something that we absolutely believe you should be exercising, and we don't want to tell you how to vote. What we want to tell you is that you should vote. It's important that not only you exercise this right, but that you remind members that if they don't know that they do get paid for this day, now they should know that they only get paid if they are registered to vote. And there obviously are some other things that are related to that right, but you can certainly exercise that right, and we highly encourage you, especially during these times when I think a lot of us have a lot of questions, and if you don't vote, you can't complain later because you're leaving it in the hands of others. And I believe that concludes my report.
Okay, Al, thank you. I will take it back from you. And look, I mentioned before our virtual meetings, and we've moved to an all virtual program for all of our meetings. We're holding no in-person meetings now. And one of the, I guess, one of the effects of that is that we don't have any guest speakers here. Those of you who have been here from for the general membership meeting and who have watched on Facebook Live in the past, you would have seen some of our professional constituents here, basically just talking to the membership, and that's part of our program that we've sort of cut out. These meetings are very important. Everyone that speaks at our meetings is very important. But for the time being, we're going to try and streamline it so that it's just us here speaking to you guys directly. We're going to have a question and answer period towards the end of this meeting, and we're really just trying to focus on the critical situations for our membership. Ali mentioned Freddie covering the pension department, and he's done a great job over there. He's been on loan to the pension department, and I think the other young ladies that are in the pension department are off to a really good start. And in the very near future, we're going to be bringing Fred back to the field. So there will be some staff alignments. Terry Quinones, if you don't know, she retired effective July 31st. Mm-hmm. So we've realigned the staff, and it looks like we're going to drop the changes somewhere in mid-October. Okay, so you will see some changes. We are instituting 2 new positions, or going back to 2 positions that we've had a long time ago, assistant field directors. They will be Greg Pasquale and Jay Scorzelli, so you will see them in your stores at some point in the near future. The field staff will be reporting through them to Paul Santarpia and then to me. So just please, as usual, give our staff as much support as you can, give them as much help as you can. You may see some new faces, you may see some old faces back in your stores, and it's going to be a good thing no matter what. So be on the lookout for that. And leading up to negotiations starting towards the end of this year, we're trying to ramp up our servicing. This has been a difficult year for us. We thought that we'd be negotiating all throughout 2020 our new CBAs. We've signed on to a few extensions, and we've got a couple of contracts that are coming up soon. I do also want to mention that we've got 2 membership servicing reps that will be also hitting the stores. You may have seen them in your stores. If not, you will see them soon. That's Steve Ziner and George Capagianopoulos. So again, give them as much support and help as you need, and they're there to help you as well. So we're putting as many people out in the stores as we possibly can. It's been difficult enough for you guys this year, and we want to try and assist you as much as possible. I would like to announce that our president, Rob Newell, has become a vice president on several institutions that we deal with: the Long Island Federation of Labor, the New York State AFL-CIO, and the New York City Central Labor Council. Now, these are all board seats that the former president, Tony Spielman, who was in the room, formerly sat on, and he did some work to talk to the presidents of those organizations, and they knew Rob for many years, and it was a pretty easy fit, as I get it, for him to be able to sit on these seats. So join me in congratulating Rob on becoming a vice president on these very important labor bodies, so that Local 1500 and our membership has as much representation as possible throughout the state of New York. I mentioned bargaining coming up and contracts expiring. Our Stop and Shop contract, and we've got about 7,500 Stop and Shop members that we represent, just in Local 1500 alone. That contract expires this December 26th. Okay. Everything that we have gone through with Stop and Shop this year seems to indicate that we're going to have some pretty tough negotiations. So just be ready for that. And I know you've seen us in the stores. I know we've had issues. We have been battling the hazard pay issue. We're going to continue fighting for your hazard pay, and it's just going to be a segue into negotiations for all of us. Now, we're doing things differently this year. Just like this meeting where we're holding it virtually, we're going to be holding the majority of our negotiations in a very similar fashion. Whether it be Facebook Live or it be via Zoom or some other format of that nature, it's going to be a new animal for us, and it's going to be difficult. It's one thing to be able to sit across the table from the company officials and to have your committee there with you and to caucus and to break out, and they're just able to follow along a lot better. It's going to be a little bit difficult, and we've already contacted the federal mediator. Prior to Stop and Shop's expiration, we've got Pickwick Key Food expiring in November this year. So that's less than 2 months from now. And we're going to be sitting in on virtual negotiations there. We've already been in contact with Pickwick. We've already been in contact with the federal mediator. And we will be choosing a committee soon, and we will be holding virtual meetings for those negotiations. And if you remember last time, we had a very difficult time with the Pickwick negotiations, and we're hoping for a better turnout this year. Okay. The last thing I want to report on, and it's a little bit somber, and it's unfortunate that I have to report on this, but all of our locals belong to our international. We report to our international. They keep numbers of COVID-related cases and people who have fallen ill and people who have lost their jobs and people who have returned to work. One of the most difficult things to monitor is how many of our members we've actually lost to the coronavirus. Now, while I'm sad to report it, I am happy that the number has not changed in the past several months, but we did lose 9 local 1500 members to the coronavirus, and that's a very difficult thing. 1 member is too many. So again, please join us in honoring their memory and honoring the sacrifices that they've done for our communities, just like you guys are sacrificing for your communities and for our communities. So we know how essential you are. We know how important you are, and we just want to thank you for everything that you've been doing over the past few months. But keep those 9 members in your thoughts. In respect to the families, we don't want to name their names, but it's been a very difficult year, especially for the families of the deceased. So please keep them in your thoughts, and thanks again for everything you do. Oh, yes. I missed one. Thank you, Rob. I would like to announce that we have a new vice president on Local 1500's executive board, Mr. Arten Shabani, from ShopRite number. Which ShopRite is Arten from?
293.
They're dealing with the
New Rochelle.
New Rochelle. Okay, thank you. Arten is filling the vacancy created by Eleanor Hammond. Excuse me. Eleanor Hammond was a very long-term member from ShopRite. She retired recently. Many of you will know that she was married to Harry Hammond, who tragically passed away not that long ago. Very difficult time for obviously us, but especially Eleanor. but through it all, she stuck through it. She stayed on the board through the most difficult time in her life, and she is recently retired. So Eleanor, if you're watching, thank you for your many years of service and your love for Local 1500, and we love you very much. But we also wanted to welcome Artan on board. Artan's been a shop steward for about 7 years, and he's been with ShopRite for about 10 years, if my numbers are correct. So Artan, if you're watching, welcome. We really appreciate you being part of the team.
Great.
That's all I have. Thank you.
So how you doing, everybody? Thank you for coming out in virtual format, I guess. Let me start like I usually do and say hello to my favorite secretary-treasurer outside of Ali Wadi, Dom Pontarelli from Local 328. I'm sure you're watching, Dom. Wish you and all your members at 328 and Tim nothing but the best, and stay safe. So, look, we have a couple of underlying focal points that we wanted to go over for tonight's meeting, and one of which is, very simple. It's profits over people. A lot of what we talk about tonight is going to fall right into that category. You'll be able to figure out where we're talking about it. If I do seem a little distracted, it's because our two IT guys are moving things around left and right. I have no clue what they're doing, but they'll let me know if we go offline, so I apologize if I seem a little disjointed. The other thing I'll tell you is that they hate it when we act like a union. And who they is depends on the day and sometimes depends on the issue at hand. But right now we're having a ton of issues with Stop and Shop. For our biggest employer, the one that certainly swept in the most additional money when the COVID crush hit the stores, they seem to act as if they've already forgotten all the hard work that our members have done in those stores. They've seemed to try to take you from essential to forgotten or essential to disposable, and I'm sure they'll disagree with that. That's their right. I really don't care. But when a company focuses more on a dress code policy that they believe is being enforced fairly as opposed to the safety of our members, it just shows that they really aren't focused in the proper manner. We had an issue in the Medford and a couple other stores, Setauket being one of them, because some of our members decided to wear a union hat. They wore a union hat. They went to work, they did their job, but they wore a union hat. And that was something that almost cost some of them a suspension, because the company was so mind-alteringly angry that one of our members could wear a union hat on the shop floor that they actually wrote them up. And some of our members wore the hats in the next day, the second day, the third day, just to press the issue. And quite frankly, should they not be more concerned about your safety than the dress code in the store? It kind of lends a little bit to what some of the things we're talking about regarding profits over people. We've been doing a lot of different safety reports. Our traditional safety report, because of the pandemic, had to get thrown out. We've been doing specific safety reports to COVID, trying to ensure that all of the safety precautions and the safety guidelines are there. Some of them have discovered some sanitation issues in your stores, and it makes sense if you think about it. I mean, the amount of hours that you guys worked and the amount of effort that you put in just to keep up with the customers and the flow of traffic, there wasn't enough time in the day to probably take care of some of the standard and the routine sanitation. Your employers didn't go to the outside immediately to get that taken care of either. So you're going to have issues in your stores, especially issues with mold or issues where certain routine cleaning hasn't been done. And you should be pointing that out. If your employers and your managers aren't getting it fixed for you, if they're not getting it cleaned for you, you need to bring it to the attention of your union rep or your shop steward so that we can get on the companies and get it done. Our first round of COVID reports 2 months ago yielded a ton of stores that had issues with mold. Not black mold, not, you're going to die from it mold, but mold is mold, and in the supermarket, mold is not a good thing and should never exist if it can be avoided. So we want you to make sure that you're keeping in great communication with us as it relates to any potential working conditions that are a little bit outside the box, difficult from norm. We are still trying to get your company to acknowledge the fact and to enforce no mask, no service. And it's not just a Stop and Shop issue, it is an issue across the board, but some employers have gone a lot further and done a lot more to try to control that, whether they're in food retail or mercantile retail. If you've been to a mall or you've been to a store recently where you have to buy a shirt or a pair of jeans, you have to stand outside, you have to wait in line, you have to wait until the head count is reduced, and then you can be let in. If you don't have a mask, you don't get in. It's that simple. But any asshole can just walk through the front door of a supermarket. That puts you at risk every day. It puts your families at risk every day, and it's something that we're trying to get every one of our employers to understand. And the CDC guidance shifted to not confront customers who don't want to wear masks. And I think it shifted because nobody knows the right answer. Well, the right answer is pretty simple from our perspective. No mask, no service. You can't come in. I'm sorry. They take their mask off, they should be escorted out, or they should be asked to leave. There is no reason for what happened in King Cullen, Massapequa to happen in our stores, but it happens. And unfortunately, it's happened a hell of a lot more times than it's documented on the news or that it's brought up by your employers. It needs to stop. It's a safety issue, and it has to stop. We're at a point where at some point in the near future, this could continue to get worse. Masks have been politicized. It's now become more of a statement than a disagreement, and it's unfortunate. And I know some of you are questioning why we're not wearing masks on this broadcast. It would be a little difficult for us to try to do this and wear masks. We are around each other on a regular basis. It's very similar to just about every single broadcast you see on television. That, you know, you see a political conversation, you see one of these meetings of this nature, it's people tend not to wear masks. So I apologize if you have an issue with that, but that's the predicament that we're in right now. Hazard pay, we're getting a lot of, I guess, confused members or confused messages that the union stopped hazard pay. We filed the charge at the National Labor Relations Board to get hazard pay reinstated. Under no circumstance are we in favor of the fact that hazard pay was stopped or was removed. We agree 100% that as long as there's a threat to your health and as long as you have to go to work every day and wear a mask and have directional arrows on the floor and sanitizer and wash your hands every time you touch anything, wear gloves or any of the other things that you have to do now that you didn't do as much before or at all, yeah, you should get hazard pay. We agree 100%. The disagreement is not between you and your union. The disagreement is between you and your employer and your union and your employer. And we're doing everything we can to get it reinstated. There are multiple local unions that are in negotiations right now with some of the very same companies that we represent, and I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that they're bargaining and their opening volleys in bargaining are all about hazard pay. This is not something that the unions are going to let go. Just because you don't see us smashing them in the face every day about hazard pay doesn't mean that we're not annoying the shit out of them behind the scenes. And I would hope that some of you that don't or didn't know that before, maybe you find some comfort in knowing that now. But that's not a decision that was made by your union. So I apologize if there's a miscommunication, but from our perspective, until there is no threat, you should be getting hazard pay, period. To Joe's point, the Stop and Shop contract is up at the end of the year. It's up December 26th. I have absolutely no idea what to expect in that bargaining. Our Stop and Shop committee is always our largest, typically 15 or 16 people. They're usually very boisterous negotiations. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to do. It's going to be a little bit more difficult even via Zoom. If you've ever been a part of a collective bargaining session, they're a little bit different when you're not sitting in the same room with people and you can't really express yourself the same way. It's going to have a very different feel. But obviously, we'll do whatever it is that we have to do to ensure the collective bargaining agreement is negotiated and that it's negotiated to the best of our ability. But that's coming in at the tail end of the year. We've been getting a lot of hits about Stop and Shop starting with Instacart. Right now on Long Island, even though you can access Instacart from, I think, every Long Island zip code, the only store that's running Instacart on Long Island is the store in Amityville. That's not represented by Local 1500. It's represented by Local 464A. They have an arrangement with Stop and Shop as it relates to that store and Instacart. We are negotiating with Stop and Shop along with our sister local RWDSU 338, as well as getting some input from Local 342 regarding our stores north of the city, Westchester and Dutchess County. For right now, that's where our negotiations are limited. We're working on a trilateral agreement between the two unions and the company to ensure that all our membership hours are protected, especially in the new click and collect world. A lot of our hours have shifted from the front end and other departments to click and collect. It wouldn't be expanding as much as it is in Stop and Shop if they weren't reaping the benefit. So that just proves again that our members are doing a great job to increase the internet intake that this company is seeing. There seemed to be some confusion when the press release came out about Stop and Shop withdrawing from the National Pension Fund. That's the National Pension Fund. The UFCW Local 1500 Pension Fund is a different fund altogether. But but they did withdraw from the National Pension Fund. Kroger, Albertsons, and the Ahold Company, all three withdrew from that fund. They are paying hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. But the one thing that those exits from those funds does is it certifies and guarantees the benefits that were achieved retroactively and historically. And when you become a pension trustee or you sit on one of these boards, you have to realize day one, that is your primary objective. Your primary objective is to work for the participant and to protect every dollar that was earned retroactively. That's the goal, no matter what. You always try to build for the future, but you can't build going forward without fully and completely protecting what's already been earned. We are in a very similar situation. Our pension fund was in the red. We have one bankruptcy that's almost completed from this year and a second that just got filed in late August. The Fairway Company's bankruptcy process should be over by sometime in October is the latest projection I heard. That company's liquidation cost 60 some odd million, 64, 65 million dollars to the pension fund. That money doesn't just go away. That money doesn't get covered by the government. That money gets whacked up, and every remaining employer in the fund gets his pro rata share. So if you remember when A&P went bankrupt in 2015, A&P left $77 million or $78 million in unfunded liability. Fairway's going to leave 60 some odd. King's filed for bankruptcy. Although we only have the one store in Garden City, King still represents a withdrawal liability of over $1 million. And in every bankruptcy that we've seen in the last 10 years, every employer has tried to shirk their responsibility and unload the withdrawal liability as an unsecured claim. I can't imagine that King's wouldn't try to do exactly the same thing as Fairway and A&P did before them. So you couple those enormous losses with the fact that when Fairway went bankrupt, we had 2,400 or so participants in the pension fund. The stores that were acquired, which thankfully for us was all but 3 on this side in our jurisdiction, those stores were all acquired by companies that would not agree to purchase them if they had to go into the defined benefit pension plan. Those stores, when they were all shifted into the annuity fund. So now the pension fund, in addition to losing that withdrawal liability, has lost the future participants in the fund. It's just yet another hurdle to deal with, but when it comes to a bankruptcy and a liquidation, the number one goal of the union and the bankruptcy negotiators is always to try to protect as many jobs as possible. Unfortunately, in this case, it also led to an enormous amount of money being left behind. As I said, King's will leave about another $1 million on the table. So, talking about Fairway, we should talk about those stores. You know, Village ShopRite spent $72.6 million, if my memory is right, and I might have boxed one of the numbers, but $72.6 million to buy 5 stores in the production center in the Bronx. 4 of those 5 stores are in Manhattan. The majority of the population in those neighborhoods has left Manhattan. They've ran for the Hamptons, they've run for Nassau County, they've run for upstate New York. The traffic is significantly reduced, and it's created a secondary issue for this employer. In addition to taking the liability and taking on all of those members and trying to run these stores and get them converted, now they have to deal with a loss of traffic that has nothing to do with non-union competition. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything other than the exodus in New York City, because the predominant number of residents there have the financial wherewithal where they can pick up and go, or they have the types of jobs that they can do remotely where they don't have to be in the city to do them. That's created a lot of difficulty for one of our newest large employers, and we want to try to help them in any way we can. One of the ways we're trying to help them is by trying to get New York City to push on the fruit carts to keep them away from our stores. Believe it or not, those stores, those little fruit carts that are on the sidewalk are no longer just a cart. They get deliveries on the sidewalk every single day, multiple pallets, in some cases 10, 12 pallets of produce. Those guys are having a direct impact on our employers, and we're going to be leaning on our elected officials and our allies throughout the city and the state of New York to try to get those people away from our stores. Those licenses were not given so that they could take business away from an established store in a neighborhood. Those licenses are supposed to be given to give a broader selection of food, a healthier selection of food in food deserts or areas that are underserved or primarily served by bodegas. They're not supposed to sit outside of a Fairway store, a Gristedes, a D'Agostino, a Key Food, and undercut their prices just to take away their business right on the same sidewalk. That's ridiculous, and it needs to stop. Some of the other companies that picked up the Fairway stores through the bankruptcy were a company we used to have 20 years ago, Taps Key Food, who's doing business as 7 C's Foodway in Georgetown, Brooklyn. We welcome them back after almost 20 years of not having a bargaining relationship. And at the last minute, we were very lucky that the Bogopah company jumped in, the Food Bazaar company, and they purchased the stores in Douglaston, Red Hook, and Westbury, saving another 500 jobs. People that may or may not have been displaced. They were not purchased by non-union operator, which gives us a significant advantage over the possibility of a company like Amazon, who purchased the 2 stores in New Jersey, shut them down immediately, had them broom swept, let everybody go, and now at some point in the near future we'll know what their intentions are. But their intentions, if they purchased any stores on our side of the river, would have been the same. Clear out the people, everyone gets laid off, and they would have done what they wanted to after a period of time that they were closed. We understand there's going to be speed bumps in all of these companies as people, are used to working for one employer and now they go to work for their new employer. The good thing is you have the ability to complain about it because you have a job. A lot of people that were in your circumstance, even in this most recent round, weren't lucky enough to have their store acquired. And by no means am I undercutting some of the speed bumps and hiccups that are there. And we understand there's been some pretty real issues in some of the stores, but that's what we're here for. We're here to try to help you transition through this process. As always, we want to make sure that everyone, whether they were retained or whether they were displaced in the bankruptcy, exercises all of their rights. And if you feel that there was something that was done incorrectly or you weren't fully represented, you need to contact us so that we can address your situation individually. We're still dealing with people who may have left and didn't file the proper claim forms. We will do whatever it is that we can to make sure that those processes get resolved. The Union Hall is still closed for outside visitors. We will take member visitors in. It's your home. It's the house that your dues built. It's got Frank's name on it for that reason. We would prefer to take those visits by appointment if we can. Everyone here gets temperature tested every single day, and when you come in as an outsider, you will definitely be required to wear a mask. We're having issues trying to figure out alternatives to some of our yearly events. Our Breakfast with Santa event, our Stewart holiday dinners at the end of the year, as was referenced, I think it was you that brought up the Shop Stewart seminars. It's typically an in-person event. Now we're talking about multiple virtual events. We're trying to do everything we can to kind of change the routine that we have, but still continue to maintain those services or those meetings. And we're going to continue to try to find alternatives. If you have a thought in your head of a better way to do it, I would encourage you to contact us either at info@ufcw1500.org or through your representative, either way. If you send those emails to info, I get every one of them. So if you've ever done it before, sometimes you'll get an answer from me at 3 o'clock in the morning if I wake up. Sometimes you'll get an answer at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So please feel free to let us know if you have any thoughts as to how we can continue to do those. On August 31st, former President Spielman, who was still the plan manager for the Pension and Welfare Fund, stepped down as the plan manager, not because he did anything wrong. There's no investigation. He's retiring at the end of the year. It was the second to last meeting before the end of the year, and quite frankly, he's very excited about his retirement. So he stepped down on August 31st, and on 9/1, I got sworn in as the plan manager to the Pension and Welfare Funds. I've been a trustee for, I think, the last 15 or 16 years on 1 or 2 of those funds. So it's not a new job for us in any way. Our boards always run very consecutively. The only thing I have is additional responsibility as the plan manager. So thanks, Tony. I appreciated you jumping out on that one and staying on for as long as you did. So it helped us out in the transition. At the same ilk, Tony also stepped down as a trustee on all of the union's affiliated funds, the charity fund, the scholarship fund, the building fund, just to name a few. As he's readying for his retirement, it makes sense to change everything over. So I wanted to congratulate Paul Santarpia. He's now a trustee on the union's charity fund, the building fund, and the scholarship fund. Earlier this year, he was also put on as a trustee to the welfare fund when Rhonda Nelson retired. He replaced her as well. So, Paul, welcome to the table. From a local perspective, I'm proud to say that shortly after a request was made, Joe Waddy has now been elected to serve as a vice president on the UFCW Minority Coalition Board. and Ali Wadi was elected to serve as a vice president on the board of the United Food and Commercial Workers United Latinos constituency group. So as a local, we now have three staffers that are represented on the board of directors of the constituency groups. John Woods is the third. He is currently the regional coordinator and on the board for UFCW Outreach, which is the fourth constituency group in the UFCW. As I said, Tony is retiring at the end of the year, 12/31. That's going to leave a staff vice president spot open. You heard earlier that Joe mentioned R10 Shabani was replacing Eleanor Hammond. We've made a decision that we're going to ask our office manager, former 30-year Pathmark member Michelle Wright, to replace Tony as a vice president next year. We're very excited to do that. Michelle's time here has been short, but her dedication, her hard work, and all of her results have been nothing short of amazing. She's an integral part of our organization. I'm sure she's helped hundreds of you with a variety of different issues you may or may not have as it relates to dues, membership cards, withdrawal cards, or anything of that nature that involves our system. So I would ask that you, if you have reason to come across paths with Michelle, you should congratulate her. She is the first office staffer to actually ever been put forth to be a vice president on the executive board. The last open comment I want to have is about the census for 2020. This is the folder, Labor Counts 2020. According to former President Spielman, who also serves as our political coordinator, we're in a really difficult situation right now. The census counts are far, far behind as it relates to standard and prior years. They're definitely running high single digits in some areas, even low double digits behind as far as percentages go. So we ask, if you haven't already done it, to please go to 2020census.gov. That's 2020census.gov, G-O-V. Or you can fill out an online form at my2020census.gov. It's really important. Believe it or not, a lot of the services and budgetary items that we get are garnered and gained through what your census counts are. It not only dictates how many elected officials you get, but it could also dictate the amount of aid we get in certain areas of the state and from the federal government. So I don't think we can afford to have any additional funding cut. I think we're suffering enough with what COVID has done, especially in the city of New York. So I encourage everyone to please participate in the census. All right, so Fred Walter, you heard, has been working in the pension fund. He asked me to address the pension valuation letter that had gone out earlier in the year. I think it went out in May, if memory serves correct. Fred, is that right? And you know, it's been a really crazy year, so I think a lot of people just didn't get around to reading mail that wasn't a bill or something they knew they needed to pay right away. And people are calling about the pension valuation. We're still in the red. That's not going to change anytime soon. There is still a question as to what's going to happen for the pension and its service credits beyond January of 2021. The trustees are working every day to try to find the best possible solution. But if you were on earlier, or you remember some of the things I commented about earlier, we have some pretty big pitfalls that we're trying to fill, and we're trying to do everything we can to ensure that the fund doesn't have to go to the PBGC. We want to ensure that no contributing employer is overburdened versus another, and equally, if not more important, we need to protect and insulate every single dollar of benefits that was earned up to and including 12/31 of this year before we talk about what we're going to do beyond it. That is the number one priority. I'm not undercutting or trying to downplay what happens in January. Some people may misinterpret what I just said, but our number one priority is locking down this fund, making sure that it is fully funded for all benefits earned prior to 12/31 of 2020. When we have more information, I will be the first one to jump on a Facebook Live or record a video and get it out there. It is what we do every time we can, and unfortunately, COVID could not have come at a worse time as it relates to trying to find a solution to the pension fund. If you consider all the other things that it's impacted and how it's impacted them, it really shouldn't come as a terrible surprise that the trustees didn't have the same access or availability to try to find a solution to the underfunding issue that we have in the fund. But all the trustees are supermarket people. So getting them to the table was not exactly a simple solution. I know that concludes my pre-prepared presentation. We have some questions that came in prior to today's meeting. So Barbara Leach from ShopRite, when will ShopRite frozen food managers get paid the same as other ShopRite department managers for doing the same job? Barbara, there are different rates of pay. There are different levels in different contracts. There are some contracts where the frozen food managers are indeed at a department manager's rate of pay, for lack of a better word. There are other contracts where there is a premium attached to it. The premiums vary from contract to contract as well. However, our ShopRite contracts will all be up in 2021, and I would encourage you and any other frozen food manager that's interested, when the time comes, in trying to serve on the committee. Any department manager, as far as the union is concerned, that does the job of a department manager should be compensated accordingly. It's not something that we don't agree with. It's just not a very easy thing to attain during bargaining. That being said, we encourage any and all participation to try to grow that category each step of the way. Gus Rendon, any guidance on Gus from Mandel in, I think, 566 in Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken? Any guidance on workers' compensation due to contracting COVID-19 at the job? Do punches help out? It was like a blizzard, hurricane scenario for almost 2 weeks. Gus, the labor movement has been the absolute hammer trying to push all COVID-related death or illness through the Workers' Compensation Board. For obvious reason, every and all facets of the government are trying to push back. Insurance companies are going to push back. They want proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is not that type of situation. I can tell you that it is not the easiest thing in the world to try to get pushed through, but every central labor body in New York, as well as all active local unions, are all pressing for the same thing. It hit the municipal unions significantly harder than it hit some of the private sector unions, but the public sector unions, as well as the central labor bodies, are leading the charge, and we are absolutely on board. To the best of my knowledge right now, there is no resolution, but it's one that we're all steadily working on. Diane DiMartino Busser, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Why did the compensation for COVID stop when it's still a national threat? In New York, we can't dine indoors. The courts are closed. The county clerk is closed, yet we remain open as an essential business. However, you stopped hazard pay. Again, Diane, I just reiterate something I said earlier. No one at this union stopped hazard pay, period. From our perspective, you should all be getting it every single day, and you should get it until the crisis is averted. We completely agree with you, but it's not something that we independently can control. We represent you, but you're employed by your company. We are still under contract, and we've done everything we can as far as filing charges with the National Labor Relations Board. We'll keep you up to date as it continues. Paul Anderson, I want to see the minimum hours for part-timers raised. Too many managers give the bare minimum, which amounts to a pittance. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, Paul. If your employers don't recognize the value of part-timers now, after what all of the part-time workforce did throughout COVID, I don't think they ever will. The question is whether or not they'll ever admit to it when they're outside the closed room and they're writing their budgets. As hard as our full-time workforce is, there are 2 out of every 10 employees in most companies, and everybody worked their asses off, overtime, 12-hour shifts, 13-hour shifts, in many cases coming back to work with less than 8 hours between shifts, doing all things that we would ordinarily frown upon as your representative, but understanding that all those things were done because it was a pandemic, because it was a unique once-in-a-lifetime crisis. Well, there should be a reward on the backside. And to Paul's point, if I was a halfway decent store manager, I'd be fighting like hell to give the people that helped me keep my store up, I'd be giving them as many hours as I possibly could. For the record, most of your employers are telling us that it's back to business as usual. Come on, that's just bullshit, and we all know it. It may not be COVID rush, it may not be COVID crush, you may not have 33 to 45% increases year over year, but we all know you're still doing really well. How are you still doing the same store sales without certain categories? You're doing it because the volumes are up. Baskets are still up. Every time somebody makes an asshole comment on a news outlet or a media or a prediction, bang, the stores get pounded again. It's the never-ending participle. It just keeps paying off. So Paul, I do agree with you, and I fully exercise and understand that frustration, and we hope that some of the store managers and the district managers release the purse strings a little bit where they can to give our part-timers the reward they so justly deserve. Any other questions that had come in during? Nothing on the feed?
Just the toy drive. There's someone who's questioning, are we having a toy drive this year?
I would say this to you, as it relates to the toy drive, we will contact John Thiessen. Jay Scorzelli's been our contact with the John Thiessen Foundation for probably 10 years at this point. Yeah, maybe even more than that. I don't want to undercut how long he's been working on it. But Jay will definitely be in contact with John Thiessen. And then, honestly, if there's some difficulty in one capacity, we may look for an alternative as well. We've in the past done stuff with Marty Lyons, with Toys for Tots. We will try to do whatever we can to figure it out, but COVID kind of creates a little bit of a concern as it relates to that. If you think about how many hands the toys are going through, then they end up here, and it does potentially create a liability. So we'll talk that through, and I do appreciate the interest. It's a very important cause that we'd love to continue to support if we can. Anything else off the feed? No? What time is it? 7:57. Is it possible that our members are out of questions by 7:57 p.m.? All right. Well, listen, we're going to do a raffle because that's what we always do at the end of every meeting. Before we do tonight's raffle, oh, that's right. Thank you. There's nothing better than finding out you forgot to do something from all the way in the back corner of the room. We're going to bring John Woods up. He has it was a fundraiser that had to change because of COVID.
In the beginning of the year, myself, Lynn Shields, Jeff Guardato, and Juan Guardato started a fundraiser that was a vacation trip to Disney. Then COVID hit, and of course, we were all much important things to do in keeping everybody safe and going along, so sales kind of absolutely fell off. And due to the problems that we're having with contacting a travel company to be able to even book a travel package for the winter, travel companies say they can't even do it because. So because of COVID, we had to change this raffle to a 50-50. We raised $2,000, so the winner is going to receive $1,000. All right, so we're going to do that drawing.
What do you want, the box?
No, I got stuff in there already.
Can you take it out?
He still needs the mic because he's going to be reading it.
I'll read the winner.
Who should we have pick it?
Let Junior pick it.
Front of the camera one. Give it to Rob.
It's $1,000, right?
$1,000.
Not misquoting anybody? Kirsten Johnston, 642 Sunrise Highway. Well, I probably shouldn't have done that. West Babylon. We have your number. We'll contact you. Congratulations, Kirsten. You won $1,000.
Thank you guys, and thank you for everyone your support.
While we're waiting, I'll let you know that there will be additional raffles in December to the normal 15 or 20 gift certificates that we do in every December meeting. We're going to be raffling off, I think, 300 and two $200 gift cards in addition to our normal $25 raffles. And we were able to get those from our international union because of the hard work of our reps and our stewards during the active ballot campaign. We were actually #1 in the region, which I believe is the first time that's ever happened in our history, and we were #2 in the country. So we thank you for all of your support and all of your efforts getting your membership signed up in your stores, and that's the reason the executive committee made a decision to kind of donate that money back to the members that helped make it possible. So thank you very much. You ready to go with that? We got everybody? All right. How many do we have? That's got to sound terrible on Facebook Live. All right, we have 15. They're all the same?
I think they're all, what, 25s? Yeah.
All right, here we go. Here's the first 5.
Okay. We've got Keith Brander from King Cullen 26. It's more than 5. Marlene Knopf. Marlene is the K silent. Marlene Knopf.
That's from King
Store 14. Yeah. Ed Ross. Stop and Shop 543. Kathleen Cassidy. Stop and Shop 2551. Kathy. Terry Hetty. Hetty. ShopRite 269. Andy Powers. King Cullen 17.
All right, former President Spielman, come pick a few cards.
Surely. How many?
I don't know, 4?
You got it.
Don't worry, Juan, I just drew yours out.
1, 2, 3. That's one.
No, it's not.
Oh.
No, it's not.
Oh, I dropped one.
That one jumped out the
All
box.
right,
like
that
a-
one. There we go.
Okay. Nick Marshall, Stop and Shop 540. Chris Mongelli, ShopRite 218. Allison Nielsen, King Cullen number 1. And Alia Badra Huber,
Huber.
King Cullen 11, Levittown. Congratulations,
How many we
folks.
got left? That was
that
4,
was-
so we have 5 left? Mm-hmm. Come on.
You're up.
Pick 5. Every meeting. That's it.
Okay. We've got Doreen Zangrillo, King Cullen 56. Steve Hennessy, Wild by Nature 202. Congrats, Steve. Bob Eubank, Wild by Nature 203. Jennifer Bolster O'Connor, King Cullen 35. And last but not least, we have Jody Wood, Stop and Shop 2551.
Congratulations to all the winners. Dan Augustine, do I have to quarantine when I come back after leaving the state in King Cullen? I would tell you to call your employer, Dan. The mandates, depending on what state you go, say that you should remain in quarantine. However, the rules for a quarantined employee that's an essential worker are different than the rules for a non-essential worker. We've had issues with returning employees where it's become a very difficult situation at store level, so I would tell you, without knowing where you're going, that you should get in contact with your store and have that conversation either before you leave or before you come back, so you know what the rules of the game are. And if you have a question or an issue with that, depending on who your representative is, you should reach out to them. Okay? Anything else?
That's the last bunch of them.
What are the rules for the essentials? Kathy Brawley, I believe the rules for the essentials state that you can come back and you can come back to work, provided you maintain complete and total social distancing. And I believe you are supposed to quarantine everything outside of work. You're supposed to remain home at all times. You're highly encouraged to get a test. You should, in all cases, if you even have the slightest of symptoms, not report to work. That may or may not be all of them. I'm not 100% sure. Am I missing one there, Tony? Tony's our resident rules committee. He spends a lot of time ensuring that we're not missing much. I believe that does encompass all of them, Kathy. That can easily be found by searching the New York State Governor's website. They can give you a little bit more specifics on it, I believe. Oh, lost that. I have no idea what that just said. When will department heads be recognized as managers, since we are doing the work of a department manager and higher pay? Laureen, I don't know where you work, but I kind of covered that conversation a little bit earlier. Different contracts have different rules in them, they have different thresholds. There are certain contracts that have minimum volume requirements before a department manager needs to be recognized from a rate of pay perspective. There are other contracts where there are specified department managers and other departments that do get premiums. Typically, we have to do all of those things during a contract negotiations. Robert Costelli, when are we going to the proposal meeting? Robert, I don't know that we're going to be able to do any type of a proposal meeting that's not virtual. So I would tell you that when we know, you'll know. But no matter what, Robert, it's going to be a very different situation. Doing a Zoom with more than 100 people is incredible. Trying to do a Zoom with more than 100 people is borderline impossible. Representing 7,400, 7,500 Stop and Shop employees makes that an impossibility. So we have to try to find any way, shape, or form that we can to do these things. In addition, we would have to ID and check people in, so it's a little bit of a longer process than it should, than it would normally be, forgive me. How do I get my coworkers to wear their mask properly and not on their chin, Cindy? Listen, we don't enforce the rules. That's not what the union does as it relates to our own members, but every member who's on the shop floor should wear their mask. It's easy for me to say as I sit here, not being in the same circumstance that you are, but people have a right to do the things they want to do, Cindy. It's a difficult situation. We would highly encourage everyone to wear their mask every day and to do the best they can on the sales floor to wear it right, but at the end of the day, I don't know how to tell you to deal with that one in particular employee. Joe O'Callahan, call Juan Guardado about your issue in Arvern. I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. Bakery leads should be managers. I agree, Katie Tikas. Allison Nielsen, your rep will get in contact with you to deliver your gift card.
Congratulations.
Sandy Funicello Bracco, if you're a long-term employee and get election day off, if it falls on your regular day off, do you get an additional day besides? I believe so, but just confirming, yes. Full-time mandatory work week in a holiday week is 32. Anything beyond that is overtime. On a part-time side, if you get election day off, you should get another day off, but if you are a variable employee, I don't know that there's a big spike in business on presidential election day. It's never fallen on the radar as one, so it shouldn't be an issue. If it is, Sandy or anybody else out there, please reach out to your rep. Okay. I don't know what that is. There we go. Oh, Anne-Marie O'Donoghue's still waiting for a gift card from a meeting, the last meeting, so whoever has that, please get in contact with her. Joe O'Callahan, I covered hazard pay earlier in the meeting. If you want, you can go back and watch that after this is over. Hi, Diane. Thank you.
Tim Mancini getting her
Yeah.
question in early.
I didn't see a question from her. Just
Okay.
she said hi.
She beat the bell this time. Hi, Diane.
I'm just trolling through the feed, guys. Just give me 1 second.
I got one over here when you're done.
You do have one? All right, just keep scrolling that way. See if there's one that we missed. I'm pretty
I got
far
a
back.
text from Mike Nass.
Mike Nass, what are we supposed to do when store manager tells us, don't tell customers to wear their masks, it's not our job? Well, Mike, I'm going to say two things to you. Your rep's name is Jeff Guardado, not Joe Waddy, so you should start texting Jeff Guardado during the meetings and not the EVP, and you know better. But the reality is, Mike, you have a right to ask a customer to put on a mask, but if your employer is telling you not to do so, then you should be letting us know, and then your rep, Jeff Guardado, the same guy I just referenced that you should be texting, will get on your store manager and he'll try to make sure that that situation is resolved by a manager. No matter what, it should be a no mask, no service rule, but your company doesn't enforce it the same way most others don't. That's an issue for us to address. You shouldn't take matters into your own hands. It could be deemed insubordinate, especially if you've already been given a direction by your store manager. Hopefully that answers your question. I did that one. All right, good. All right, so the last thing I want to say is this. This is the most recent edition of the Register. I think probably for the first time in decades, if not the first time ever, there are members of 1500 and 342 standing together on the front of this newspaper. They're standing together for one reason. There's unification between our locals. There's unification with Local 338, Locals 1262 and 464 in New Jersey, the 5 locals that took a strike in New England last year. We are moving this union and we are moving this region together to ensure that all members get as much support as they possibly can and have the best working conditions that can be provided on the shop floor. You know, I'll say this to you and I mean it, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where our members were willing to put on 342 gear and 342 members were willing to put on 1500 gear just to prove a point that we were together. But you got to remember one thing. They absolutely hate it when we act like a union. You know, being union isn't me sitting in front of this room talking into a stupid camera, and it's not you asking questions and me answering them. It's how we look out for each other. It's making sure that collectively we all try to speak to a common good and to a common goal. And the fact that every member here or every member watching virtually has the ability to shoot messages, whether they be polite, whether they be nasty, whether they're taking shots, the fact is you have that right because you're in the union. If you worked for a non-union company, you wouldn't have that right, and you'd certainly be fired. You know, we're really proud of the job that we do, and we're really proud of the solidarity that we're building with the rest of the locals in our region. And when you're dealing with companies like Stop and Shop or larger companies like Albertsons, who currently owns Acme, you're not, as an individual union, ever going to be successful trying to take them on one at a time. Without the help of your brothers and sister unions, there's absolutely no way you're ever going to be successful. Even though we represent the highest number, I believe the highest number in Stop and Shop or Giant as an independent union, we're very, very small in the grander scheme of things. 7,500 people, there were 30,000 on strike in New England last year. So without the help and support of every union, we're going to have trouble. This was the first step in what's probably going to be a very long path on trying to get the companies to realize that we are not in any way their adversary. It makes me a little sick because there are some companies that see us as an absolute partner. King Cullen has taken out 2 full-page ads in the last 8 weeks. Again, something I don't know that they've done any time in recent history, celebrating the work that their employees do and thanking the unions for their assistance through COVID and for helping to guide them through getting better safety conditions in their stores. We have other key food companies that want to join with us and do a joint label on a mask with the company name on one side and the union on the other. Why is it that any company who's willing to act accordingly and treat people with respect is willing to partner with their union and isn't embarrassed by it and doesn't try to take it on and enforce a dress code policy over human safety? You may not agree with us. It's your right if you don't. But here's what I know. We're going to keep pushing no matter what the company is to ensure that every member has a safer place of work than they did the day before. And if you help us by giving us the opportunity to serve you, we can get there and we can get it done. If you don't, you still have a right to break our balls, but it's a hell of a lot easier to help you if you point it out and you give us a chance to fix it. I hope you've had at least something out of this meeting. And if you want to make fun of me, they got me put on the front of cranes a couple of weeks back, looking as fat as I am these days, standing leaning over a shopping cart. But other than that, I just want to wish everybody a very, very welcome back to school, whether your kids are going remotely or whether they're going, believe it or not, there are some schools that are going back full time. Your kids went away to school, they went away to college. I hope they have a safe trip. It's a very difficult time right now for any parents. So I just want to wish you all the best of luck and thank you for your attention tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Be well.